Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be around the world. Thank you for taking the time today to join today's webinar, You and Your UX Professionals. My name is Eric Neiberg, and I run marketing and operations here at Scrum.org, and I'll be your host today. I want to thank Summer Lawrence and Adam Deardurff for joining us, and they'll introduce themselves in a moment, but you can see them here on your screen. Next slide, just some brief housekeeping. Just a little bit about what makes Scrum.org and who we are. So Scrum.org is founded by Ken Schwaber, co-creator of Scrum, and he's our chairman and continues to drive the organization really focused on the evolution of Scrum and the Scrum Guide. We provide training, certification, and lots of learning like this webinar to help you advance. We're really focused on helping people and teams improve how they work, improve what they do, and very much focused on dealing with and solving complex problems. Next slide. So you will all be muted today, but you can ask your questions, and we welcome those questions. We'll hopefully leave time at the end as well, and may take some throughout. You'll see in the GoToWebinar panel a little box that says questions, and you can ask your questions there. And next slide. With that, okay. I will hand it over to Summer and Adam.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody, wherever you are. I'm Summer Lawrence. I'm the host PST today. I also do some Agile coaching. My passion is about teams that are moving towards professional Scrum and the organizational challenges that they encounter. And our webinar today is a lot about that. And today I am here with one of my good friends and colleagues, Adam Deardurff.
Thanks, Summer. I will be your UX professional for the day. It was nice of them to put me in the title of the presentation. But I'm a user experience consultant and coach at Insight. I'm a big advocate of inclusive design and passionate about seeing UX play a larger role in enterprise agile teams, which is one of the pieces that we're definitely going to focus on in this conversation.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so before we get started today, we want to do a quick survey. Eric, can you pop that up for us? We want to understand how you're working with your UX professionals today. Are your UX professionals a member of your Scrum team? Are they a subject matter expert outside of your Scrum team, or do you not really work with your UX professionals? So take a moment and take that survey for us. Thanks.
Just give it another second or two. We've got about 70% of y'all have voted. Thank you very much. And wow. I will now close that poll and share your results.
Awesome. That took way less time than I anticipated. Thanks for everyone's participation. It looks like we have a 53% have UX as a member of the Scrum team, which is amazing. I did not anticipate to see that over 50%. 33% as a subject matter expert outside of the Scrum team. That's what we see a lot, and we'll be addressing some of those challenges today. And then 25% with no UX. And that's definitely something that obviously I'm a big advocate for, but Summer can also attest to the value, and you'll hear about that during this presentation.
Great. Let's see. I thought I was sharing my screen. Let me go back to that. Can you guys see the survey time slide?
Yep. If you just,
great.
There you go. Fantastic. You're all set. Thank you.
Okay, so with those results, I can tell you we'll have a little something for everybody today. We want to start off by doing a little bit of shared knowledge. So, Adam, the definition of user experience is wide and deep. Can you help get us on the right page?
Yeah, I definitely think for us, it's always important to define what something isn't as you're thinking about what it is and how it can contribute value to your team, project, program, product. And when we hear UX, there's a lot of focus on deliverables. So wireframes, can you make sure this thing we built is on brand? We just needed a design or some usability testing. And there's a lot of focus on the outputs. And really, that's not what user experience is all about. Don Norman and Jacob Nielsen from the Nielsen-Norman Group, the founders of UX, really talk about UX encompassing all aspects of the user's interaction with and perceptions of a company, its product and services. So when you think about how UX actually contributes value and back to what you're doing, it's not just having that tangible artifact, but it's really deeper, and it goes end to end with the user experience.
Right. It's all about the user. And that brings me to one of the favorite things that I like talking about with you about over coffee is what I have a problem with, right? We all like to have our gripes. This topic today about how to get the most out of your UX professional is really important to me because I have a problem when I work with a UX professional and all I get is one bucket of one-time research about the user. It's like a point in time, or it's 5 years old, and its relevance is really stale. I also struggle as a Scrum Master on a team when we build designs as part of refinement or handed them by a consultancy, and we end up having to throw them away because conditions on the grounds change so frequently. And the thing that really I struggle with is when we treat UX like an approval barrier when it's not on the team. And the reason I have a problem with that is the first Agile principle. I mean, the first Agile principle is that we're satisfying the customer, who we need to understand, who is our customer today, through early and continuous delivery of valuable product. So anything that doesn't contribute to making the product more valuable or delivering it earlier and more continuously is a challenge. And I really struggle with UX being misused as a way to slow that down or provide irrelevant inputs rather than being a help.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I have my own problems with what's going on right now. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are rooted in organizations that are working against or for themselves and not for the users, that have those silos built up and are trying to justify their ideas or product decisions without user input. And UX really has the power to break down those walls. But we're spread too thin. The number of Agile teams and the vast amount of employees that are at these organizations, the scale of UX to those people isn't big enough. So we have to recognize that we need user experience, and it needs to be staffed as appropriate. And that's because the impact of our practice really does have a positive outcome on the user's experience and the business value that you're going to generate. We're all accountable for the impact of our product on people's lives, and those are the users. And so in reality, user experience practitioners have the same goal as the Scrum teams, and our goal is to create products that users can't live without and that maximize business value. And we can't emphasize enough that user experience practitioners should care as much about getting business value as the user experience. Those can't be mutually exclusive.
Right. And I think that you and I both agree that if you're doing professional Scrum and you need UX skills and capabilities, you have them on your Scrum team. That's a professional standard. And that's because in the Scrum Guide, it says development teams are cross-functional with all the skills as a team necessary to complete a product increment. So if you need UX skills and capabilities and you're doing professional Scrum, it should be on the team.
Summer, what does it mean to be on the team?
It means that you are committed to what the Scrum team is committed to, which is the product vision. You are committed to the sprint goal every sprint, and you are equally capable and accountable for achieving a product increment every sprint.
Awesome.
So that's professional Scrum. But like I said, my passion area is for teams that aren't necessarily there yet. Right, we're moving towards professional Scrum. So this is a little more reality, right? We've got these 3 teams. And Adam, what's over there to the right?
Sometimes referred as Planet UX. User experience or marketing communications, or wherever your user experience group lies, is often on an island separate from the Scrum teams or IT part of the organization or wherever they're deployed. And really, they have a limited number of people that can work with those teams. And so I want everyone to kind of think about retrospectively, is your UX person actually on the Scrum team, or are they just working with a Scrum team?
Right.
Think about what Summer said, because oftentimes you have this plan at UX that's actually deploying people to work with multiple Scrum teams, or in lucky cases, they're actually embedding them on the Scrum teams when we're needed to break down that complexity.
Yep. Okay, so we're acknowledging reality. And the big question we want to help answer today is our input into this question. How do we maximize the value of UX when it's outside the Scrum team? So when you've got a UX professional that is part of Planet UX or that is orbiting several Scrum teams, how do you get the most out of that relationship? That's what we want to talk about today. Hopefully those of you who already have UX on your Scrum teams will get some valuable input that you can apply today as well. All right, so we have some advice. Again, this is IMHO, and the advice is to really invest where you get the biggest return on value. And that means you start by investing in the product owner and UX relationship. Then we're going to talk about investing in refinement, investing in the Scrum team skills, and then applying UX to validating the quality of your product. And then after that, we're going to talk about how you package all that up. So creating a transparent working agreement and then inspecting and adapting. Okay, topic number 1, the product owner and UX relationship. One of my favorite. I like experiments. So we've got a hypothesis. If you spend time defining a product vision and the successful outcomes for a product, then the product is more likely to be used and useful. The Scrum team can creatively self-organize for those outcomes, and measuring success is easier. All that's related to the 10th Agile principle that I have up there. So my hypothesis is based on the assumption that your product owner is maximizing value. And if you want to invest where you get the biggest return on value, you should invest in that relationship. Okay, here's what it means to invest where value gets defined. The person in the middle there is your product owner. And tactically, this means a couple of things. The first one is, if you're defining the product vision, your UX professional can help you define what's valuable about this product. Adam, do you have an anecdote about a time you were able to help a product owner identify what was valuable about a product?
Yeah, really, when we're talking about defining value, it usually falls into 3 buckets: making money, reducing risk, or saving money. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of products that don't evaluate where they fall and what the actual tangible value of that product will be. It might be a good idea. There are things like the Amazon Dash button that in principle saves everyone clicks with a press of a button, but the value of that to a user isn't the same as what they anticipated.
Right.
We see that a lot of times that comes through R&D, or a product owner has a great idea, and the user experience person in partnership with them can help validate, prototype, and really bring the light to, does this actually have value?
Right. Tactically, also, I like it when I have a user experience professional to help me work with the product owner to define what success is. Because when we say valuable user outcomes, we need to be really explicit about what that is. And you need to understand the user to understand what a valuable outcome is to them. You don't know if your product is successful unless it's achieving the goal you wanted it to achieve with your users. And then you have to know what that goal should be. I've also had a lot of success with user experience professionals helping my product owner measure user outcomes. So whether that be usage statistics, customer satisfaction, or what happens in calls to actions and click-throughs. UX professionals are really good at that.
It's amazing how many groups don't have benchmarks going into when you're going to work with someone on a product, and you ask, well, how often does this work, or how much money are you making, or how much time is a user spending? And there aren't any defined benchmarks or even tracking available, and we can really put that in place from the beginning.
Right. It's hard to gather evidence and know that it's evidence if you don't know it's evidence of what and for what. when it comes to the outcomes. Okay, understanding the customer. Tell us just a little bit, Adam, about how UX professionals help a product owner understand their customer.
There are a lot of different tactics and strategies that we can deploy to understand the customer better. And I'll talk through some more of those in a few minutes. But really things like personas and story maps, even getting down to just simply observing the customer and getting in their space, whether that's sitting with them on the job, whether that's riding around with them as they're doing service calls, talking to customer service. You can do some very simple things to actually get the voice of the customer injected into the process and into the product to where you're understanding what they need and what value actually is to them. And that's usually defined through things like personas and story maps.
And I think those are super valuable for a product owner developing anything. Even when you're doing something internal like a platform conversion and your users are internal, there is so much value on the table when it comes to making things more efficient or upgrading your business workflows through how you redesign that platform and that application. You can save a lot of money by taking some time to understand your user. Speaking of value, I love mapping value streams. How do we go from concept to cash, and what are all the important critical steps in between? And there are some times with a product where a UX professional who's been trained in these things and been doing it for a long time can give the product owner a little bit of an epiphany on how they might make the product even more valuable to the user. What the user doesn't know that they don't know. And then they can help a product owner understand how to communicate the product's value to their organization. Sometimes it's really important for a product owner to be able to advocate for the decisions they're making about the order of the product backlog and the value of the product. And I find that UX pros can help with that.
Ideas are complex.
Yes, they're really complex. So we would love for your UX professionals to invest in your product owner relationship. I really think it levels up your product owner's decisions and your product owner's ability to make highly valuable decisions.
So before we move to that next section, I've got a couple of questions I think probably tied to this first part, definitely tied to the first part. Hannah asks, regarding Planet UX, what do you think of dual track development? She's on a team where the product owner would like to leverage this for their Scrum teams and is on the fence about whether or not this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Depends
dual track development is widely misunderstood. Often it's thought of as two parallel tracks where they're working towards different goals. And that's not actually what's happening. Adam, can you give them a view of what's actually happening when you think about dual track?
Yeah, just to go a little more in depth in that, the idea that the design track is moving towards one thing and producing something valuable that will be consumed by the team later. That's totally different from what the development team is working on. When in actuality, if you're doing dual track Agile, they should be feeding each other and working more in parallel. And so it definitely can work. I think there has to be a shared understanding of how that's going to work. Traditionally, even if you have a UX person on the Scrum team, they're working ahead. And part of that is what we're going to talk about here in terms of investing in refinement. The difference being, if you have a Planet UX team that's only focused on producing outputs, then in their own silo, and just throwing those to the development team to build, that's not actually how it's meant to work. And that you'll have those things that Summer talked about. You'll have artifacts that build dust right away and aren't accurate at the end of the project when the product's deployed. And really, that's not what dual track Agile should be about.
Yeah, dual track Agile is not separate, as it implies. It's a false impression. Everything happens within the sprint. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Because remember, the sprint contains both your focus on the sprint goal to complete an increment and all of your activities to refine the future.
Awesome, thank you. I think the rest of the questions you're actually probably about to answer, so we'll hold off on them for a few minutes.
We'll dive into it.
Awesome.
All right, so we really advise that if you have time for a team that you invest in that product owner relationship to level up the decisions they're going to make, the next thing you really need to do, we recommend, is investing in refinement. So backlog refinement is one of the most misunderstood activities in the Scrum Guide that I've seen. It's the act of adding detail estimates and order to items in the product backlog. And frankly, that's deceptively simple. To do that, a product owner has to have a huge amount of understanding. And for the development team to assist the product owner, there has to be a huge amount of shared understanding. And the idea that the development team and the product owner can do all of that successfully or alone kind of implies that your product owner is a magician and can pull a rabbit out of the hat. They can take those ideas from vague to concrete. So I want to reframe your vision of what product backlog refinement is. Are you ready? We're going to have an animation now. Are you ready? So instead of thinking of product backlog refinement as things bubbling up, what if you thought about it as a learning journey? What if you thought about refinement as activities that help you know if something is a good idea? You start with it being an idea. You ask yourself, is it a good idea? And then, is it a valuable idea? And then, is it a good, valuable idea right now? For some products, you're going to want to do multiple activities in that learning journey to understand if it's a good, valuable idea right now. And for some products, you can make those decisions and do those activities really quickly. What we're going to talk about right now are some of the ways that UX can help you work through this learning journey until you decide, yes, let's do it. All right? Now, again, this is not waterfall. You are weighing the risk of testing and examining what you don't know now versus testing and examining what you don't know in production. Okay, Adam, you want to walk us through some of these tactics, this small sample?
Yeah, some of these you might not even realize you're doing or not think of them as refinement, and that's okay. But in terms of what we're calling refinement and how it's able to break down complexity and define what's good and valuable, and what's good and valuable right now, I think that Summer, you skipped out of presentation mode.
Yep, I fixed it.
You're good. Story mapping is a pretty fundamental one and turns your backlog into a portrait of how a user is going to use the product. And so it feels a little more linear, but it's very user-centric instead of technical-centric.
It's a really useful way to look at the backlog when you want to figure out what's valuable, right?
Definitely. And that translates into what some of you might have seen if you've done any research on Lean UX or the PSU, the Scrum for UX course is based around the Lean UX canvas. And this is more of a framework that you can work on with teams and product owners to refine that idea. It's based around what's the business problem and outcomes you're trying to achieve, the user and customer needs and benefits, and then what are the experiments we need to do to validate that solution. So it's really helpful at the product level, at the feature level, in breaking that down. And then there are tons of ways where we can gain understanding and alignment with stakeholders and users. You may not think of them as refinement, but things like design sprints and design thinking sessions and diary studies, some of these that are more formal or have a construct around them that makes them feel like something bigger potentially. Those are all refinement types of activities that you can, through those exercises, come to an alignment and determine that value faster, and really get everyone on the same page and feel invested in that product outcome.
Right. And the thing I wanted to bring up here before we go on to the next one is the Scrum Guide says, the guidance is a Scrum team, including this team, spends 10% of its capacity on refinement. That's a tool, not a rule. And it doesn't say that every person spends 10% of their capacity. It might be that part of your team, that includes a UX professional, spends a lot of their time in refinement and the rest of the team doesn't. So when you look at all of these tactics, think about how much play you actually have to budget towards refinement activities.
And then visualizing the experience is really powerful because as complex as ideas can be, as you reduce that complexity through those activities and solidify what the requirements, technology interface needs are, you can define those through things like wireframes and concepts, prototypes, and bring those to life in a way that makes them tangible, not just for user testing, but to stakeholders, for people to invest in that if you're far enough ahead of it or working with a product owner. But those types of things are really valuable, and where the rubber meets the road from a idea to an actual product.
Yeah. And what I like to emphasize there is the word you said, invest, right? This has always been about balancing what we know with what we're going to go do. And that means whatever we're investing in should be a workhorse. It should be able to react to changing requirements and be flexible. A mock-up should be flexible and useful. A visualization should be useful. A user persona should be useful. It shouldn't be a show horse, meaning it's something that you take a picture of and hang on the wall and it captures a moment in time.
How many people have gotten to the end of a product launch and looked back at the concept and seen everything that's changed, and said, that's not what I designed?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for the evolution of these and not having to make them as polished as a designer might want, or a UX professional might be used to delivering outputs that are very refined. And really, those are meant to work for the team and with the team.
Yeah. So again, I wanted to call out that this journey from idea to let's do it is not necessarily linear. If a product owner has an idea in the backlog and has all the information they need to be confident that they should do it, to be confident that it's a good and valuable idea right now, go straight there, right? But if not, there's a lot of UX tactics and activities that can help you move all over this diagram until you get to the confidence of being able to do it. And anything you use as a UX activity, we just remember that you keep in mind that it should be a workhorse. It should continue to be valuable for future work and for the team to use while creating an increment. There you go. That's refinement. All right, Eric, anything significant we didn't cover in the questions you've got?
A lot of questions have come in, but I think
Yep.
let's keep going because I think they're a bit more general and not specific to this particular section.
Cool.
Okay, so this is kind of where our sequence breaks down. If you have no other time, we want you to invest in that relationship with the product owner. And then if you have more time, we'd really love for your UX professional to invest in refinement activities, because then, again, you're investing and where you're getting the highest return on value. If you have more time, we also think it's really valuable for you to do two other things. And we can't put these in order. It's invest in team skills and validate quality. So they're separate, but we consider them parallel activities. So I have a beef as a professional Scrum trainer. We've got this Agile principle that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. And I believe it if you have a cross-functional team that has all the skills and capabilities to build your product. If you don't, and you need them for your product, you can't make the best designs because you don't know what you don't know. And user experience has a huge number of skills. So Adam, how can we give the team some fundamental skills? What can you teach the team? What can you give the team that will be useful to them?
Yeah, just before I get into that, I think the counterpoint to that is there are a lot of UX professionals that hold what they do very near and dear to their heart.
That's true.
And we need to open up that silo or that personal investment in what we do, and really become teachers and mentors to the rest of the team. Because when we talk about investing in refinement, it's not just the UX person investing in refinement, it's investing with the team in refinement. And there are a lot of transferable skills as we get into refinement in some other areas like story mapping and conducting interviews, which product owners, business analysts, those are things they can pick up and start facilitating right away with a pretty low learning curve. Some of them already do it without any UX professional, but there are things that you could work together on to make them better. And then more formal things, how to write surveys. So if you're going to a pilot or a beta test, how do you write a good survey to get feedback and make changes? How do you follow a style guide and accessibility guidelines? Working with developers and making sure they understand why you designed it the way you did, what branding elements there are, and what accessibility actually means to your users and the product. And then some design fundamentals. There are things, especially with accessibility, inclusive design, like being able to navigate the screen without a mouse. So that maybe Mouseless Monday, we've heard before, where everyone unplugs for Mondays and they have to navigate the products and think about how they're designing for a user that can't point and click at elements.
Yeah. And I love investing in these skills on the team. And a lot of them are only transferable in paired situations, right? Because they're so contextual to the product and what you're building. The biggest thing here is that if you're a Scrum Master and or a user experience professional or a product owner, you should be asking yourself, how do I shift maturity and growth of user experience skills, the ones that we need, to the team? How do we partner with our UX professionals to shift that maturity and growth effectively?
And the UX person, by shifting that maturity and growth to the team, they get opened up to do more of the other things that they want to do instead of policing brand guidelines and accessibility criteria.
Wait, what are you telling me? That they don't like sitting down with the spec and a red pen and checking what the team built and making little marks? That's not their favorite thing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so teach the team. It's really important to give the team the skills they need to be more capable and accountable for producing valuable products. The other thing that we really need to consider when we're thinking about UX professionals on our teams is how we validate quality. And the first question I have to ask you is, do your quality standards include user experience? Okay. That could mean, do you have a UX professional pairing with your developers for functional testing, user experience cohesion, or accessibility testing, which is really important?
Yeah, I think there's always the question when you're in class or a workshop of, how do I work with developers? There's so much past life of handing this artifact over and you're supposed to build what I designed or what I spec'd out. And in reality, on a Scrum team, as you're working and being part of that, even if it's part-time, you should be pairing with those developers and teaching them how to do the same things that you do. And that goes as far as design systems as well. As you get more mature and sophisticated with your product, you may find that a design system is worth spinning up and can be really effective at managing the quality standards by just giving out-of-the-box styles and components to developers that can manage some of that quality.
Is that kind of like a content management system?
Yes and no. It could be a component of a content management system, but think of those as the Lego blocks. These are the blocks that you can build with. It's not going to say that you automatically have cohesion. It would be like saying everyone that has the same PowerPoint template would design the same PowerPoint. But a design,
we know that's not true.
A design system gives you those building blocks and helps with consistency for sure.
Okay, so it's for like simple or maybe complicated design needs, and it's not meant to really inhibit creativity. I just want to make that point. It's about It's about like consistent good practices at the fundamental level. Cool.
Yep.
All right, and definition and done and sprint review, we're going to dive into a little bit because I know for our audience, those are really familiar. So when you think about UX and your definition of done, that is a quality aspect and it's a boundary. The definition of done is a critical boundary because it allows teams to self-organize. In order for teams to effectively self-organize, they have to have a common goal and focus, like a sprint goal, right? They need to have boundaries that include their definition of done, their team working agreement, and, any of the strategic initiatives in the organization. And they need to have some kind of tension, like a time box. So that's the length of the sprint. And when you think about users who care about quality, your definition of done might want to include these things. If you've got a style guide, should probably align with the style guide. If you've got a design system, should probably align with the design system. And if there's exceptions, reach out to your UX professional. Definitely accessibility requirements are more and more important. Adam, can you give people just a little taste of what accessibility requirements means?
Yeah, a lot of UX designers think about accessibility in the terms of color contrast and font scales and things like that. But there's so much development that goes into building an accessible product, and the way that you're able to test those, from zooming in the browser to 200% to mobile accessibility and testing with screen readers like VoiceOver or JAWS or NVDA. There are a lot of requirements that go into actually building something accessible, because accessibility is really the outcome. We want to build products that people can access based on whatever limitations or constraints that they have. And so it's very, very complicated. It's not as simple as designing the right thing.
Right. I also like to encourage teams to think that if they have mechanisms to understand how a user is using their product, that they put that in part of their definition of done for their increment, right?
Definitely.
If you want to know how your product is performing in the wild, you need to make sure you have the components, whether those are usage metrics, performance metrics, that are in place. And that's definitely a user experience component, because like we said in the very first section, UX can help us understand what successful outcomes are for our users, and if we are achieving them.
Yeah.
And then customer feedback. My question for you is, how close is your team to actual customer feedback or actual user feedback? And then finally, think about user testing. I know a lot of organizations have a historic formal UAT, user acceptance testing phase, that is meant to maximize the time of the internal users by consolidating it in one place. And a lot of advice I give is to pull user testing as far left into the sprint as possible, because you can learn a lot by even putting your piece of work in front of one or two users.
Yeah,
so that's the definition of done.
And think about all the quantitative and qualitative feedback that you can pull into a sprint review or refinement in terms of what you learned out of that product.
Right. Sprint review, I think, is the second most misunderstood part of Scrum, other than refinement. Sprint review should be, what did we learn? What's the increment? We're going to show you the increment, and then what is the future? And I think a lot of what of the future should include things like, are our users using it? What does the data say? Are we having successful outcomes for this product? And then specifically, what are users saying about our product? It's important for product owners to have those discussions with their stakeholders and the users who come to sprint review. Okay, so Adam and I have just given you a large dump of in our honest opinion.
Yes.
So take it with a grain of salt. But this is something that I feel passionate about. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, we've seen in a lot of engagements on various product teams, different ways that people expect UX to engage with Scrum teams. And oftentimes when you say, I'm on a Scrum team, the vision for what that means is different. And
right, it's not explicit.
Right, and like you were saying with refinement, if you add up all of the activities that go into being on a Scrum team, if you're truly on the Scrum team, the ability to embed in multiple Scrum teams means you can't attend all the events and be productive.
Right, like if you add up 10% of refinement and all the maximum event time boxes, like all of those things together are about 22% of a sprint. So if you're attending all of those embedded in a Scrum team, and you have 2 Scrum teams, that's 44% of your time in events and activities right there.
And one of the you lose focus, right?
Yeah.
One key sign of that is if you have stand-ups, sorry, if you have your daily scrums.
Good job.
I fixed it.
Good job.
And you have a UX person that's in there, and a lot of what they say is no progress. I didn't do anything. I haven't made progress because I can't get to it, or something like that. You'll find very quickly that the time management and expectations aren't aligned, and so working agreements become really powerful as a mechanism to align with multiple teams.
Right. They're super important. And one of the things I've struggled with in my career while coaching is, well, what is a working agreement exactly, and how do you build one? And I think they're important. They were important enough for me to build you a definition, because I think if you're an empiricist, empiricism needs something transparent to inspect and then adapt on. And if you don't have something transparent, read explicit, what are you inspecting and what are you adapting? I did a lot of research, and I gathered all the dictionary definitions of a working agreement, and then I smashed them all together, and I came up with this. So this definition is a summer special. Feel free to steal it. A working agreement is a living artifact, meaning it changes. We inspect and adapt it, that makes our expectations of each other transparent. I know.
I think the living artifact piece is definitely a challenge for some people. A lot of times working agreements are implicit, and we don't talk about how we work with each other, and by making that an artifact and making it explicit, then you can inspect and adapt it.
Yeah, I think a lot of frustration and emotion, unnecessary emotion, occurs because we haven't taken the time to be explicit about expectations. So we built a kind of quick start template, and you can grab this from the deck afterwards. This is just something I like to use with teams, so enjoy. We start by answering some questions together in the room. So let's say you got a UX professional saying, I can't be a member of your Scrum team because I'm orbiting 3, but let's answer these questions. Why are we working together? What's the point? What do we expect from each other? When should we expect that thing? And how are we going to go about adjusting the expectations? Once you've answered those questions, you need to put the answers to those questions in a transparent place. Where can everybody see it? You need to take the answers to those questions and check for understanding again, and then go through and really viciously replace any subjective words with clear words, like when can you expect it? As often as needed. Well, that's really subjective. What does often mean? The most critical part, though, is this last bullet. Set up an inspect and adapt cycle for the working agreement. How often are we going to review this working agreement with our UX professional to see if it still works for us? 3 weeks, 4 weeks, every sprint, every 4 sprints? Make a decision. Oops. I keep popping out of presenter view. Give me a moment. We'll get caught up. Okay. What might this look like as an example? Why are we working together? We want to maximize the value of the product to our users by building the right thing and exceeding their functional and visual expectations. That's beautiful, don't you think, Adam?
That's well worded.
Thank you. I thought so too. What do we expect from each other? Collaboration. Why is this an important bullet for a UX professional to see?
I think the way that we've implicitly defined working agreements previously is around artifacts, is around outputs, and the idea that we can say we expect collaboration throughout the process, that really enforces the idea of workhorses, not show horses, and less of that approval mindset, that we're going to be approving this versus we're going to be working together to achieve success for this product.
Yeah. And then I've got a couple other expectation examples there to just jog your ability to be creative with your team. When should we expect it? Things like each team will have a primary and secondary UX designer assigned. That's really explicit, even to the word designer, right? wow, look at us in our order. I know, we're good at this, aren't we, Adam?
Oops.
The user's experience, oops, hashtag oops. Scrum team will actively pull UX SMEs when something significant changes or is learned. Now, I would have a great discussion about the word significant if this were the working agreement, right? We wouldn't need to get too concrete, but it should have been a conversation.
Yeah,
Okay?
I think that opens the door to, we need you in refinement or sprint planning, or you can get pulled into those events without having to attend every single one.
Right. Like, let's say, hey, COVID-19 hit and we do textbooks and now they need to be online. That is a significant change in the trajectory of our product. Please start coming to refinement now.
I'd say so.
Yeah. When designers are going to be available, where you contact them if they aren't, and then how you're going to deal with work, like tasks and PBIs with UX work will be tagged hashtag UX Guild. And the reason for that would be so they could find it. So this is just an example that we threw together based on many of the versions that Adam and I have built in the past.
And I'll say that, like Summer said, this is just an example. You might not have the luxury of having a group on team or Planet UX or a guild that works together towards you might have just one person, and that's okay. But you still need to define what those expectations are together.
Oh yeah. And that first question, why are we working together, becomes really important the more teams a UX professional has to jump between, because it helps them context switch, right? Okay, so how do we actually maximize the value of UX when it's outside of our Scrum team? We have given you some ideas. In summary, you've got that product owner and UX relationship. Adam, anecdote time. What is the most successful product owner UX relationship you've had?
I've worked far enough upstream with product owners to be able to help them get investment in new products, to where working with the team and everything, the priority for them in the value was validating new work, not just for the team, but for the business as a whole. And so those consistent touch points, and by building a good relationship, you're able to really be a partner in all of those conversations and helping them carve out a vision for the future.
Yeah, especially if they have to go convince investors within the company to fund the new vision. Refinement. Is there a time where you saved somebody a bucket load of time, money, and frustration by some of those refinement user experience activities?
Yeah, we've done workshops with groups of users and found that there were items on the backlog that were starting to get prioritized that we just scratched off. Users said, no, we don't need that. That's not valuable. The idea that we can eliminate features by just talking to users is super valuable to not only building the right thing, but not creating bloat. How many times have you had features where you said, well, users don't use this awesome thing we built. I don't know why. Yeah. It's probably because you didn't talk to users and do the refinement necessary.
There's a whole Agile principle around that. My favorite one, it's the art of maximizing the work not done. And it's essential. It's a very lean concept. And investing in team skills, I can tell you that I've worked with UX professionals to help teams understand accessibility in a way that put their product ahead of new regulations, especially in regulated industries where that was required. And they taught the team enough skills that the team could proceed in application without direct help from a UX professional after just a couple of sprints. And that was very valuable because, again, our UX pros were stretched thin. It was critical for that team to be able to get to a done increment every sprint. And then validating quality. I have a lot of stories, and I won't go into them today, about teams that started pulling user testing and customer feedback into part of their definition of done, and how it changed what they built and the value that magnified from there. But regardless of what you do and what you choose to incorporate from our opinions and suggestions today, that explicit working agreement is really valuable. The art of empiricism is making things transparent, inspecting it, and then adapting on it and continuously improving. And if we left you with nothing else today, it would be, if you have any subject matter expert who impacts your team and is not part of your Scrum team, an explicit working agreement is critical to a healthy relationship with them and maintaining your team's productive ability to do professional Scrum.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got a bunch of questions.
Awesome.
Hopefully we'll get to some of them. The first one we have is, how do you integrate research in Agile, or user, in this case, of course, user research into Agile?
Adam, you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are, especially with some of the longer term research, formalized ethnographic research and things like that, it might take longer than a sprint, and that's okay. The idea that you're planning and working ahead with that and understand when those learnings come in, when you discover something, how that refines the work, whether that elevates value, lowers value, and that's being communicated to the stakeholders and people through sprint reviews. Yeah. That's the big thing. You can use any type of research, and by holding those findings and not opening it up to the team, you're not helping the situation. It's not being as valuable as it could be.
Yeah.
So I would say for longer term research, make sure you're planning ahead. You can break down research activities into smaller increments as well. So think about this sprint, we did all of the recruiting and set up the usability testing guide or something like that. Then the next sprint, you actually did the testing. So there's some of that. It's always a luxury if you have a separate researching team, but you can also do that on the team pretty easily if you have a UX professional who's well versed in that, or if they share knowledge with the team to where you can do it in a sprint, like Summer's saying. There's nothing saying you have to do long-term research, but you could validate a product that you did the concept, prototype, usability test, and build it in one sprint, which is scary to some teams or organizations. But if you have that cross-functional team and the relationship, you can do that.
Yep. If you can learn it in a sprint, do it. If you can't, that's okay. Refinement activities can span sprints. We just recommend that if you've got a longer term refinement activity like research, that you report any significant learnings, especially at sprint review, so that you can inspect and adapt on what you've learned.
I would also, one last point, make sure you're being inclusive of the team and stakeholders in research. Just because you're performing it, or you're the one responsible for facilitation or anything like that, having the team invested in hearing those learnings and what the user needs are, the time you can talk to a developer and say, this is why we're building what we're building, this is why it's important to our user, that's huge. That's a breakthrough on a team.
Yeah.
And I think make sure you're not overly internalizing it as well and getting other feedback. It's really tough, especially if it's a 1 or 2 person team doing that research. You internalize it and lose sight of others' opinions and things as well. So on our initial question around the 2-track topic, Mark chimes in, doesn't fully agree with everything that was said, and really his question's about how about proactive identification of latent needs and opportunity? How do we avoid creating vanilla products without being able to inject innovation?
That's a great question. So one of my questions back to everyone in general would be, how responsible or open is your organization to the Scrum teams owning their own innovation? How much are you allowing them to innovate on the product they have, or is that going into a bubble and you're feeding them what they need to do? There are challenges with creating vanilla products or getting to that lowest common denominator, and if that's what you're focused on and you aren't allowing the team to ideate and expand on what the value of the product could have, they probably know if you're doing all of these things, they probably know the product, the user, and what's happening the best, and so they can definitely ideate and innovate as well as anyone else. So that would be one thing that I would bring up. I'm not sure. What do you think, Summer?
I'm trying to place the question into, because he stated that he disagrees with some stuff, and I'm just guessing which point he might have disagreed with. But yeah, I don't want to create vanilla products. And I found, as a Scrum Master in my career, that we create the most vanilla products when we don't include UX activities in refinement, and when we don't spend time in refinement thinking about the art of the possible. We move forward without being confident that it is a valuable and a good idea. And we do that because, again, to your point, Adam, we can become a little bit of order takers. So I think that's my contribution to that answer. Not sure we got all the way there for you, Mark, but you have our emails. You can reach out.
Yeah, definitely.
And he responded. Good answer. Thank you. So I think we,
cool.
I think you nailed it.
Yay. Thanks, Mark. I feel better about my Tuesday.
I want to be conscious of this time box. I know there's other questions, and I apologize that we're not able to get to them all. I'll share the questions with Adam and Summer, and maybe they'll be able to respond to you all via email as well.
Yeah.
But we only have about a minute or two left, and I want to be conscious of everybody's time.
So before everybody leaves, we do stuff. And we'd love to connect with you after this. One of the things we do is the Professional Scrum with UX course. We got a couple of offerings, and that's because the PSU class is really for Scrum teams already doing Scrum that want to incorporate user experience more fully into their Scrum teams. It's a great course for that, has a lot of practical hands-on, and will expose your teams to a lot of different user experience tactics. Adam, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, the next thing, we have a UX and Scrum in Harmony 4-part workshop. This was established more specifically for UX professionals and how to incorporate them into the organization's products and Agile teams. So when you think about the changes that takes from an organization standpoint, from a mindset shift, and from a practical execution, there's a lot there. So we put together a 4-part workshop. We're excited to offer that. And then lastly, we have coaches and teams beyond Summer and myself that can really help guide, coach, mentor, even deliver in user experience, business agility, technical agility across the board. Whether you're doing something that's data related and doesn't have an interface, or something that's very user focused, like a mobile app or software.
So reach out to us at agile@insight.com, or you have Adam and I's personal emails, and we're part of the Insight Digital Innovation Group. And I think that's a thank you.
Yes, thank you all very much. And thanks for taking the time today. Thank you, Summer. Thank you, Adam. And everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.